today will be at John Ratajic's workshop, and I've tasked him with repairing a 100-watt monster and a little practice amp, and also reverse engineer a circuit for duplication at a higher wattage output. Make sure you like and subscribe. This is really interesting stuff. This guy knows a ton about amps. You need to know. Like and subscribe. Take two, so I don't think I hit the button. This is a VH100R. Paul Gilbert used to use one of these back in the day, if anyone knows who Paul Gilbert is. If not, look him up. So, I brought this Laney and I acquired it. This is a reissue. Laney used to make them in England, and they moved shop to China, and they moved them back, so this is made in England, but the second time. So, it wasn't working when I bought it, so what happened, John?
It was probably sitting for a while, so it got a little bit of electrical arthritis, as we call it in the industry. Basically what that means is a lot of the potentiometers, the controls were crackly when they were moved, and it's just a case of the lubricant that's in there when they're new. Gravity grabs a hold of it and just brings it down and takes it away from the wiping action that is the control itself.
And you said there was a carbon strip.
Yeah, there's a carbon strip within the construction that is the resistance, if you like, of the pot. There's an arm that picks off different percentages of that resistance. That's the variable resistor nature of a potentiometer, so to speak.
Right.
And that needs to be lubricated. When the lubricant dissipates or disappears, you're left with a scratchy sound, and sometimes the signal will actually cut out. You can find a spot on the rotation where the signal will just drop out completely.
Right, because it becomes disconnected.
Yeah. And so we've got a special can of lubricant that is specially made to reintroduce that lubricant, so it's like new again, and it makes a good contact, and that fixes all those crackly pots essentially. The other problem that it had was there was a preamp valve that was making its own noise.
Right.
When you have a high gain amp, you will get a certain amount of hiss. That's just the makeup, that's the normal makeup of a high gain situation. But this particular valve was making its own noise, sort of arguing with itself, going and
like
so yes, and so we located that, put a new preamp valve in, that sorted out that problem. The other issue it had was at some point it had some new output valves put in, and it had some dymo labelled instructions from the previous tech about how the bias should have been set, but I found that the bias was actually a little bit incorrect, enough that it needed to be addressed to make it run properly. Right. So we readjusted the bias so they would you get the best sound and longevity from the valves.
Right, so you're having a bias that's, you said it was negative bias, they run too cold.
Yep.
And so you don't get, that affects the sound.
Yeah, well the bias is an adjustable voltage, and if that bias voltage is too much, it effectively forces the valve to run very, very cold, and it's not conducive to a sustaining nice guitar tone. The valves will last probably a fair bit longer because they're just not working very hard.
Okay.
But it doesn't sound all that pretty. And the opposite of that is if there's not enough negative voltage and the valves are running excessively hot, it will sound very, very nice.
Right.
But not for very long. So there is a spot in the middle where it's
sweet spot. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's what the bias adjustment is.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, if you do need to get revalved, you need to bring it to a guru to get it biased. So all right. Well, thank you very much for that. So happy shredding, I guess. So,
yes, it's just like a new one.
I might have to get one of your amputators, because I won't be able to play this for too loud.
No. If you have neighbours, yeah,
they'll probably move out.
Depends if they're paying rent or if they own the place, I think.
Yeah, right, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, if they're paying rent, they have the option to move out. If they own the place, then you may have to buy an amputator.
So what happened to this amp, John?
Yeah, Doug. Well, when I first switched it on, it had quite a nasty buzz or hum that was not controllable with any of the volume controls at all. So I immediately turned it off and had a look inside. And at some point it might have been abruptly handled over its period of life.
Well, students were using it, so you probably drop kicked.
Yeah, there were quite a few wires that it had sort of left the circuit board through through jarring and vibration. So it was a matter of reinstating those connections onto the circuit board. That got rid of the noises, and then after that, the output valves were extremely microphonic, meaning that they were sensitive to knocks. If you went up and just tapped the amplifier like that, the valves themselves would amplify that noise, and it was just not a nice sound. As soon as you plugged the guitar and tried to play a few low notes, you get that telltale rattle and warbling sort of a sound. It's just not clean. So a couple of new output valves and a rebias, and we cleaned and lubricated the potentiometers, because quite a few of those were crackly. There's a special can of chemical that we use for that, specially made for the job. And that's pretty much it, and it's come up a treat. It's extremely usable amp, even though it's definitely not a well-known model or brand. It's called a Dream Tone, made in China, probably.
Yeah, I think so.
Actually, yeah, it says so on the back, made in China. Not a bad thing, just not very common amp, but extremely usable. Would be great for a pedal platform sort of amp.
Long story short, the tube amp mechanic has got me going again.
And it's every bit of 40 watts, like it says on the panel. It's quite a chunky sound coming out of it. It's very usable.
All right, cool.
With two 8-inch speakers.
Two
8-inch speakers, yes.
Oh, I thought I only had one.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, buy one get one free. All right, excellent. What can you tell me about this amp?
Okay, well, I dragged the chassis out of its container and had a look inside.
Because this was all the way from Canada.
Right, and all good components,
right.
point-to-point wired, and so I traced through the circuit.
I asked you to.
You asked me to, with the view of duplicating it at some point, probably, possibly as a bigger power output.
So I might explain that. So yeah.
So I've drawn it all out. Yeah.
There we go. So I've asked John to maybe build me a high gain amplifier of sorts, but I like the sound of this, and so I don't know. Do you want to explain what's different about this design?
Okay. Well, a lot of high gain circuits have a similar idea. It's usually one half of a triode into another half of a triode, which is a 12AX7, into another triode, into another triode, and as you progressively go on, it gets more and more distorted, and you can tone shape for a specific end result. And this is no different. It's done similarly to a lot of other designs.
Right.
And it has 1, 2, 3 gain stages, and then an EQ stack, which is probably similar to how a JCM 800 derives their overdrive in their Master Volume series. But the difference is that they've optimized the circuit so there's a lot more gain. So straight up, there's a lot more gain than, say, that Marshall circuit. And then from the tone stack is a Master Volume, and then it carries on through to the phase splitter, and then the output valves, and then onto the speaker. So I've drawn out all the bits and pieces. So if you wanted this duplicated, I have all the component values written down, so we can make this again if you so desire down the track.
And what would this actually be a model of, like a Soldano or another brand name of sorts?
Not really. It's
unique.
It is somewhat unique. Yeah, the fellow that invented it obviously had a particular sound in his head that he was after. It's quite unique. It's just a different version of how an overdrive is developed.
Okay, but it's just placement of the EQ.
Yeah, the EQ is at the end of the overdrive circuit. The 3 gain stages that it ends up with then can really be maxed out to get the maximum amount of sustain, because the EQ is not in the middle of the preamp, so to speak, it's at the end.
So it doesn't affect the gain staging.
That's right,
Right.
yeah.
And the other thing I was going to ask about is is it toroidal?
Yeah, toroidal. Transformer doesn't introduce any distortion,
Okay.
apart from when you turn the amplifier or any amplifier up so loud that there is no more current available within the design. That's when you reach power output distortion, if you like.
Right.
It's like, holding your foot flat to the floor in your car. The engine will only rev so fast, it
Right.
just won't go any faster. Same thing with an amplifier. If the transformer is designed to deliver a certain amount of current, once you reach that current, it can't get any louder. That's when it starts to introduce output valve distortion.
Okay.
And it's not so much the fact that it's a toroidal that causes that. Toroidal is just another way of building a transformer.
Right. Is that way more efficient than the other? Or?
Yeah, it is more efficient. There's a lot of pluses to a toroidal. They're faster to produce if you for the factory that is set up to make them. They have a machine that just winds the wire on very quickly. The flux that radiates from the transformer is contained more in a toroidal, because the magnetic circuit is basically a donut with the wire going around it. So all the flux lines are contained within a very small section, so they don't radiate a lot of flux, which doesn't really mean a lot to the average person, other than it is just a little bit more efficient and a little bit faster to produce, so a little bit cheaper to make.
Because it's only 10 watts.
If you're running the amplifier flat out, then you've got the preamp distortion plus the power amplifier distortion added along with that, and that would be the reason why you're getting that extra fat sound.
Right. And so, in your professional opinion, do you like the way it's been designed, or is it just different flavours?
Yeah, it's certainly a design that is useful. It is what it is. If you like it, that's fine. If you don't, then you need to try something else. There's nothing bad about the design.
Right. Okay.
It's all been done correctly. All the values and how things have been employed to do a particular job, that's all done perfectly. The end story really is, if it sounds fine,
Right.
That's all that matters at the end of the day.
Different strokes for different folks, yeah.
Exactly.
All right.
Well, it could be the basis for the lead channel of a 2-channel amp, perhaps, down the track.
Yeah. Maybe you could do that.
We can certainly try it, yeah.
We can do that. All right. I'll see you all in here next time. Thanks, John. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe.